it all go wrong today?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch the game. I just got home, so I got to preface it by saying I didn't watch the game. So I've sort of come on just to talk about the Europa and the rest of the season as a whole. I don't think there's much to really talk on the game. You know, we lost at Craven Cottage, and it was another poor performance. And
Again.
you know, we're seeing exactly what we saw at the start of the season. You know, this is kind of the stuff I was talking about when I came on earlier on the season. Is that there was this myth that people were making up that we played amazing at the start of the year and that we had some injuries and then we started playing really badly. These types of games have been littered in the season from when we had the full team. So we're back to win loss with our full squad. So
Yeah.
nothing's different. I think the main thing that's surprised me is that for me, the conversation on Ange long term died a long time ago. The question has always been, should we sack him now, or is it more detrimental if we sack him now, or if we just let him just run out the rest of the campaign? But now people are starting to this conversation of, oh well, we can see him next season. I find that amazing, to be honest with you, because I think regardless of if he wins the Europa League or not, he will be gone next year. That sounds a bit mad, but my point is that if he was to win the Europa League, I think he's going to walk away from the job in the summer anyway, because he's seen how this is probably the most up against the wall he's been in a managerial position ever. He's been criticized left and right. This is the hardest he's had to work as a manager, and this is the most he's been criticized and tested. I think if he wins the Europa League in the summer, he's going to go, do you know what? I've proved my point. I've won in my second season. I'm going to walk away and find something else, and I'm going to be, the market for him as a manager is going to be a bit higher if he wins the Europa League. Someone in France or Italy or maybe a Premier League team will look at him and want to take him up if he was to win the Europa League. That's not nothing to be sniffed at. That's a major European trophy. So, and I think the board would say, do you know what? You've won us a European trophy. We don't want to invest any more money into you, because the recruitment's been so up and down in this rebuild that I think the board are going to look at it and say, do you know what? We don't want to give you any more of your players either. I think they'll be happy to. I think they'd be happy to. I think it'd be a mutual departure if he won the Europa League, and if he doesn't, he has to go. So I'm surprised that this is a debate still going on, to be honest, amongst the fan base. But
Hugo, the way I look at it with that, and I don't think Ange will walk if we win the Europa League, but the way I look at it, if Ange does win the Europa League, which I don't think he will, by the way, but if he does, Levy is going to fight tooth and nail to keep him at this football club, because he knows he's cheap. He's pretty much a yes man. He'll follow the way the club wants to work, and Levy likes these kind of guys. So I don't see a way that Ange leaves the club.
And he's got him Champions League football as well.
He's got him Champions League, but for what? For us to be without Europe again in a year's time. He's not going to win the Champions League next year if we was to win the Europa League. He's not going to qualify for Europe through the league, because there's too many better managers, there's too many better squads, there's too many more competent front offices in the Premier League than Tottenham. So yes, he would have got Champions League football, but then he's going to have to invest. Again, he's going to have to leave, otherwise he's going to come under a lot of pressure. And if he does invest, is he going to invest in this manager? I don't know, because this manager, the investment has been so mixed. It's been so bad. Looking at Dragusin and Brennan Johnson and Tell's been an awful signing, and then it's confusing. Signing young players, but then also extending players like Ben Davis, and he's clearly relied upon senior players like Basuma and Bentancur who have let him down completely. And when they've let him down, he's not really, still great conversation about the youth team setup, but that conversation's, if Ange wasn't going to use the youth setup in the period we've just come out of when we had no options, what makes you think he's going to use them now? We had a great period of time from November through the January window where we could have recalled some loanees if he wanted to, where we had no options, and he didn't use any of the youth players. He barely used anyone. Scarlett wasn't used. Lancashire was sent off on loan. Dorrington played 10 minutes against Southampton. Ashley Phillips wasn't recalled.
It was one game, Hugo. It was one game against Elfsborg coming off the bench.
Elfsborg went. Yeah, there was the one game, and that was towards the end of the injury period. So for me, the whole conversation on the youth setup, if you still believe Ange is this like project youth manager, then I don't know what's going on.
That one.
Because he had so much time to use it. This whole idea that he's this project youth manager is just not true. It's just not true, And he's a win now manager. And that's based. There's plenty of evidence for that, and based on the fact that he's had to rely on these senior players throughout the team. He's not brought in any youngsters, Look, we've got some good young players. you know, we've got some good young players. The idea that if Ange goes, the rebuild's done is not true, because we've got good young players that other managers will benefit from. You know, again, you're looking at the tactical decisions today. You know, playing Archie Gray at centre back in the second half and us conceding goals again. You know, for me, Archie Gray, I think he's going to be a good he's going to be a good Premier League player, but I've not been convinced that he's this sort of transcendent talent that's like amazing in every position. I think he's just been another body in centre back. He's been pretty poor at fullback, and we've yet to see him in centre mid, you know, really properly. So, yeah, you know, it's a mess from top to bottom, really. It's a mess. I just don't. Ange's not going to be here next season. I just can't see that. I just can't see it, because he's not going to win the Europa League. He's not going to win the Europa League. You know,
he's not.
Even if we got past Frankfurt, you've got Bilbao in the final, and that's just never going to happen. You know, it's just never going to happen. You know, again, this whole thing of him being in the Europa League being this like ticket to keeping him, I've just not been convinced by that either. You know, we said that about the Carabao Cup. We said that about the FA Cup.
Yeah.
Now we're going to say that about the Europa League. You know, the only reason you have to believe that we can win something is because Ange said that we'll win something. You know, there's nothing on the pitch that
100%, 100%
that will tell you anything about that. It's just what comes out of his mouth in the press conferences. So, you know, what we'll give Ange credit for it this season, he's a great salesman, and I've never seen someone be able to buy as much time as he has by just talking in press conferences. You know, it's incredible. I will give him credit for that, because he has been able to buy himself time that he's not deserved through commenting on the games and talking about controlling the games. You know, he's coming out and talking about, you know, we just need to find that consistency. I mean, you've been at the club 2 years now, mate. You sound like a guy who's come in January and you've tried to turn around a relegated. You know what I mean? Sounds like he's the way he talks now. He sounds like he's come in January to a terrible situation, and he's trying to salvage it. Like it's not his problem to deal with. Like, oh, you know, this is just the situation. You know, we're not consistent. It's like, mate, you've been here 2 years and you're talking about consistent play. It's, you know, what are we doing here? You know, what are we doing here? And in terms of managers moving forward, you know, I think McKenna would be a good option, because he's actually a young man. I came on here months ago and said McKenna's someone that would want to manage at Tottenham. I think he's a good manager.
One of the only ones.
One of the only ones, but I think he's a good manager. I think he's a young manager, and that's the type of manager that you can watch the football and see mistakes and be trusting of the fact that it will improve. Whilst you know, with Ange, it's just not. There's just been so much. There's just so much evidence. You know, even the Europa League game. You know, the Alkmaar game was much better. It was a much better performance, definitely. But if you look at the game as a whole, you're talking about one fixture at home against Alkmaar. It still wasn't good enough, because you concede another poor goal against the run of play, and then we just looked like we lost our way a little bit. We get the third goal back, but then we're hanging on for dear life at the end of the game. And I just felt it's another game where we needed to score 3 goals in order to win, you know, and that's just not consistent. That type of performance isn't consistent throughout a season, needing to score 3 goals every game to win. You know, we conceded 2 again today. So, you know, and Solanke's not, they're not cutting it. You know, Solanke just hasn't scored enough goals. He just hasn't scored enough goals. That's the way I look at it. You know, people talk, he presses and he makes tackles on the halfway line, but for me, it's like you bring in the number 9 to score goals, and that's, I think, him not scoring enough goals has been part of the reason why our attack's not been very good this year. You know, inconsistent. I mean, not very good. We scored a lot of goals.
You say, yeah, exactly. You say, no, our attack hasn't been good this year, but only one team has scored more than us in the Premier League, which is Liverpool.
Yes, but how many? That's what I mean. But what I'm saying is that we're an attacking team who scores loads of goals, and Solanke has scored less goals than Jamie Vardy in a relegation Leicester team.
That's
mad.
You
know, it's crazy.
That's crazy, right? That's crazy. I found that stat, by the way. So I found that stat. Jamie Vardy, 38-year-old Jamie Vardy in a relegation Leicester team has more goals than prime Dominic Solanke in an attacking team. We're an attacking team. That's what we do. We're supposed to score goals. And Solanke's got. That's what I'm saying. It's not. It's great. He presses and he holds the ball up. But I mean, you know, you call in a bricklayer to lay bricks. You don't call in a barber to lay bricks. You know, I don't care. I don't necessarily care as much if he's pressing and doing all this stuff. If he's getting goals, it doesn't matter if he's not doing any of that other stuff. You know, and he's just not scored. He's just not scored enough goals, in my opinion, for him to be this £65 million, you know, top striker. So
Hugo, let me ask you this regarding Ange Postecoglou, right?
Yeah.
even if Ange was to leave in the summer now, whatever, do you still trust that the next manager, whether it be McKenna or whoever it may be, will it get better over the long term? Can it get better, or are we always doomed to be in this situation or disappointed with Daniel Levy at the helm?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. When Nuno came into the club, that was a nightmare waiting to happen, wasn't it? That was a nightmare situation waiting to happen. You're talking about an underwhelming manager at the face value. He doesn't get a summer window. He doesn't get any time with his squad. He doesn't get any transfers. And he was better in the league than Ange. He had a higher win percentage than Ange did in his second season, right? And that was after 3 months, right? And I'm saying that was as bad as we thought it could get at Tottenham. That stint of Nuno had, where it was really toxic, and we lost 3-0 to United at home. That was as bad as we thought it could have got, and that was still significantly better than this manager. And that's not because Ange hasn't been given enough money. It's not because Ange hasn't signed enough players. It's not because we haven't signed enough high potential talent. It's not because of that. It's because the coaching's just not been very good, and the players. Barnaby Slater said something very, very good a couple of weeks ago on one of his. The players, I think the players don't understand why they're playing a certain way that we concede so many chances. I don't think the players understand necessarily why this setup is going to win us games in the long term. I think that's part of the problem, and I think there's obviously murmurings all year about players. Are they playing for the manager? I think there's clearly something not right. You're talking about Basuma doing balloons before the season. You're talking about Maddison. I think there's probably been some sort of thing with Maddison where the manager's gone, do you know what? Like, you're not consistent enough. And when I've played you every week, you've been injured for 3 months. So do you know what? You can sit on the bench every other week. And that's, funnily enough, Maddison's been available all season pretty much. There's definitely some stuff going on. You've got guys like Romero who don't really want to be there. Clearly, you've got Pedro Porro, who's probably he might be turned to a Real Madrid maybe. I don't know. There's things that are not right amongst the senior. And, in the summer he got rid of key senior players. Højbjerg, Dyer. People didn't like Eric Dyer, but he was a senior member of the team. You get rid of key senior members of the team, and you replace them with idiots like Basuma, who just aren't. Basuma's the seniority figure in the team. How is that going to lead anywhere? Basuma's a child. You know what I mean? He's a 28-year-old child. So, but to answer your question about whether it will get better, I think it would, because the squad's clearly underperforming as a whole, and the squad's not a 15th in the league squad. We're a seventh to eighth place team. And that would be much better. That would be much more palatable if we also have a young manager who's coaching us, not an old manager who's sort of in his peak. Let's say, if you get in a McKenna who's still young and you were a mid-table team, I think that's a more palatable situation, because you've got a manager who's young, you've got a manager who's growing with the team he's coaching, and he's also learning and adapting, which is learning and adapting. I mean, imagine a Tottenham manager learning and adapting to the situation. I mean, God, I mean, that's unheard of,
Big up, Hugo. Thanks for coming
Hugo.
today. Good call.
Nice one, chaps. Nice one, yeah.
Cheers, mate.
See you later.